told us to line up before dawn. Not that it mattered. None of us had slept. The air still smelled like the fires that had burned through the hab blocks 2 nights ago. Smoke still clung to the ruins. People stepped around ash piles that used to be neighbors. The sky was grey, but not with clouds, with the dust of buildings and the dead. We were told it was an honor. We knew it was a sentence. The Munitorum recruitment post wasn't a building, just a reinforced bunker surrounded by Arbites with shock mauls and suppression visors. The line must have been 200 long, maybe more. And that was just our district. We stood in silence. No one cried, no one ran, no one begged. This was Cadian soil. We'd been trained since birth to expect this, but expectation is not the same as acceptance. A loudspeaker crackled to life. Next! One by one, we approached the desk. An officer in dull flak armor sat behind a data slate, not looking at any of us. Just typing, approving, processing, like we were meat. Not recruits, just flesh in uniform, waiting to die on a world we'd never see on a map. When it was my turn, I stepped forward. He didn't ask my name, didn't ask my age. He already knew. Private candidate Garron Hale. His voice was flat, dead, like a man reading his own obituary. Age, 17. Birthplace, Khazar Harok. Status, fit for service. Fit, as if that mattered. He pressed a button, and my entire existence became a line of green text. Now, Imperial property. Left arm. I hesitated. He didn't ask twice. He didn't need to. 2 arbitrators grabbed me by the wrist and slammed my arm onto the steel plate. A servo brand descended from the ceiling, glowing red hot. There was no ceremony, no warning. Just the iron, just the burn, just the smell of my flesh searing as the metal sank into my skin, marking me for the rest of my life. Serial 97, C/14-8972, Imperial Guard property. Replaceable, expendable. I bit down on my teeth until I tasted blood. I would not scream. Not here. Not in front of them. The officer didn't even look up. Proceed. I stumbled forward, clutching the smoking wound, breath sharp and ragged. The room was spinning. Or maybe that was just me trying to stay conscious. We were herded into the next chamber. A priest was waiting. Black robes, golden aquila, eyes that had seen too many boys become corpses. He held out a battered copy of the Imperial infantryman's uplifting primer, pages soaked in blood that was too old to name. Kneel. We obeyed. Not because we believed, but because we had no choice. He began to speak, not like a preacher, but like a man who'd memorized the words long ago and stopped caring what they meant. Repeat after me. And we did. I swear to serve the Emperor without question. My voice was hollow. I swear to die for him, if necessary. My hands were shaking. Fear is failure. Faith is armor. I didn't believe a word, but I said them anyway. Every one of us did. Because in that moment, the oath wasn't religion. It was survival. As soon as we spoke the final line, the priest nodded. Not like he was proud. Like he was confirming inventory. Another body ready for the grinder. We were told to stand. One boy didn't. He was younger than me, 16 maybe. Already trembling, brand still smoldering on his arm. He whispered, I can't. The arbitrator nearest him stepped forward. He didn't shout, he didn't threaten, he just raised his bolt pistol. The sound was louder than the brand. A thunderclap, a burst of red, bone fragments hitting the wall. The boy dropped in silence. A moment ago he had been a recruit. Now he was proof. Proof that there was no going back. Proof that fear meant nothing. Proof that the Emperor demanded obedience or death. The arbitrator kicked the body aside. Next! No one moved. Not in grief. Not in defiance. Not in shock. We just stepped around him. We had to. The line had to keep moving. That was the first death I saw. Not on a battlefield. Not in a trench. Not under enemy fire. Here, in the place where they turned civilians into soldiers. They didn't even drag the body away. Just left it there. A warning. A lesson. A prophecy. We received our flak vests next. Used, stained with someone else's blood. A helmet with dents. A laser gun that rattled when I shook it. They called it equipment. I called it leftovers. We were marched out into the cold, into a waiting transport vehicle, its engines growling like a caged beast. Rows of other new recruits were already inside. No windows, just metal walls. Smell of sweat and fear. I sat down, shoulder to shoulder, with strangers who would soon be brothers, or corpses. The doors slammed shut. Darkness swallowed us. Someone whispered, "Where are they sending us?" Someone else answered, "Does it matter?" Then silence. Only the engine rumbling. The sound of chains. The grinding of gears pulling us deeper into the machine that would chew us to pieces. Outside, Cadia was quiet. Too quiet. Like it was already mourning us. And maybe it was. The transport lurched forward. We were gone. No farewell. No ceremony. No last look at home. Just the smell of burnt flesh on my arm, and the memory of a boy who died for being afraid. I didn't know where we were going. I didn't know if I'd ever see daylight again. But one thing was certain. Whatever future I might have had, ended there. The engine growled, the chains locked. I closed my eyes and whispered to myself, the man I used to be died that day. They told us the training grounds were holy. They lied. There was nothing sacred about this place, just dirt, blood, and echoes of screaming recruits who never made it out. We arrived at dawn. By noon, 3 were dead. Not in battle, not against the enemy. Dead from training. The commissar stood on a raised platform, black coat trailing behind him like a funeral banner. He didn't speak at first, just watched, cold, unblinking, like a predator deciding who to kill first. When he finally opened his mouth, the words were a sentence. You are no longer citizens. You are weapons, or you are waste. No introduction, no welcome, just that. We were marched into the live fire trench range. The instructors didn't explain anything. They didn't give safety briefings. They fired real rounds over our heads and told us to run. The first time I heard a las round crack past, I flinched. The second time, I ducked. The third time, I kept moving, because the ones who stopped were already dead. "A boy to my left tripped!" He didn't get back up. They didn't help him. No one did. The trench wasn't mud. Not really. It was paste. Soil that had been mixed with blood and bone and rain for years. Every step squelched. Every breath tasted like iron and rot. Then came the crawl. We were ordered down, face first. The ground was soft. Too soft. I didn't realize why until my palm pressed against something that shouldn't have been there. Flesh. Rotting. Wet. Human. We weren't crawling through dirt. We were crawling through the dead. Not metaphorically, literally. Corpses from the last batch. Left to rot. Left to sink. Left to merge with the ground so we could learn what war smells like. One recruit vomited. The commissar didn't speak. He just raised his bolt pistol. We heard the shot, muffled by the trench walls. The boy didn't scream. He never got the chance. The instructors walked past his body like it wasn't there. Their voices carried over the trench. If you cannot crawl with the dead, how will you fight beside them? We kept crawling. Last rounds snapped overhead. Dirt sprayed into my eyes. Someone ahead of me was shaking, not from fear, but from madness. He kept whispering, "I smell them. I smell them. They're touching me." He started crying. The commissar was already watching him. We knew what that meant. The crying stopped. Not because someone comforted him, but because someone put a round through his skull. We were not being trained. We were being discarded, filtered, sorted, shaped by death until what remained was too numb to break. When the trench ended, we were forced to run live fire obstacle drills, burning wire, explosive pits, grenade ranges where recruits were expected to catch one thrown back. You either reacted fast, or your name became a serial number carved into a memorial that no one ever visits. By nightfall, we were bleeding, coughing, and half mad, and that's when they brought out the chaplain. He was old, not kind old, not wise old, worn old, eyes sunken, hands shaking from the weight of every death he had blessed. He held up an aquila and spoke like a man reciting the script of a tragedy he was forced to watch over and over. Faith will sustain you. No one believed him. Not really, but he kept talking. The Emperor protects. A laugh broke out. Sharp, ugly, wrong. The commissar's eyes flicked toward the sound. We all knew what was coming. A single shot. The laugh stopped. Silence returned. The chaplain didn't flinch. He just kept preaching, like executions were part of the sermon. Maybe they were. Training didn't stop at night. We were ordered into formation. One man was slow, just a heartbeat. Not even a mistake. Just human. That was enough. The commissar stepped forward. "Fall out of line again," he said, "and I will execute the man to your left, not you." The recruit nodded, terror in his eyes. The commissar smirked, then shot the man to his left anyway. No hesitation, no warning, no emotion. "There. Now you've learned faster." That was training. Not to shoot, not to march, not to obey orders, but to watch men die and keep standing. We slept in trenches filled with rainwater and nightmares, lass fire still echoing in our ears. Rats crawled over us. Some recruits screamed in their sleep, others didn't sleep at all. A boy whispered to me the second night, "Do you ever think about running?" I didn't answer. Not because I was loyal, because I knew the truth. There was nowhere to run. The Guard owns everything, including fear, including hope. The next day we were shown the firing line. Not how to shoot, how to be shot. Commissars lined up 3 men who had fallen behind in drills. They weren't traitors, they weren't cowards. They were slow, that was all. The commissar didn't raise his pistol. He handed it to one of us. "Execute them." The recruit refused. He didn't get to refuse twice. Another shot, another corpse, another lesson. Then the pistol was handed to me. I don't remember pulling the trigger, but I remember the look in his eyes. Not rage, not fear, just understanding. He knew this wasn't about punishment. It was about conversion. We were being turned into something else, something useful, something obedient, something dead inside. The chaplain returned that night. He stood over the fire. His voice was hoarse. "Victory is measured in faith." Nobody responded. He tried again. "Through faith we endure." Still silence. Finally he broke. His voice cracked. Please, believe in something. We didn't. We couldn't. Belief didn't stop the bullets. Faith didn't stop the executions. Pain did. Pain taught us how to move. Pain taught us how to obey. Pain taught us how to survive. The Emperor wasn't here. Pain was. And pain never left. By the end of the second week, half of us were dead. Not in war. Not by Xenos. But by the hands of men wearing the same uniform. We weren't soldiers yet. We were the raw material for soldiers. Broken down, reforged, burned in fire, hardened in blood. And when the next morning came, and the commissar walked the line, boots crunching over the gravel, he stopped in front of me. He studied my face, my expression, my eyes. Then he nodded. You might live. I didn't feel pride, just emptiness, just numbness, just the quiet understanding of what he meant. Not that I was strong, not that I was skilled, but that I was breaking in the right shape. Night settled again. The chimeras hummed in the distance. Another recruit cried silently until sleep took him. I stared at my burnt cereal brand. I stared at the stars, and I understood something I hadn't before. The Emperor didn't shape soldiers from will, or faith, or purpose. Number. He shaped them from pain, and all of us were being shaped, one corpse at a time. The Emperor didn't make me a soldier. Pain did. They loaded us into the transport like we weren't human anymore. Maybe we weren't. Maybe that part of us had already died in training. The inside of the troop carrier was metal. Everything was metal. Walls, benches, air. Cold, unbending, uncaring. There were no seats. Just straps. Just enough room to stand if you pressed against the bodies beside you. Mass efficiency, the officer called it. We called it being buried alive. The door slammed shut behind us, sealing us in darkness. An engine roared. It didn't sound like a machine. It sounded like a wounded animal forced to keep moving. The floor shook under our boots as we began to move. No one spoke. Not at first. Not until the lights flickered. They weren't proper lamps. They were warp torches. Dim red glows set into iron frames, burning with something that wasn't fire. They didn't illuminate so much as stain the darkness, turning every shadow into something hungry. That's when I first noticed the Psyker. He sat apart from the rest of us, wrapped in chains. Not metaphorically. Real chains. Bound at the wrists, throat, and ankles. Head-shaved eyes blistered red from sleeplessness. He stared at the wall, not blinking, not breathing right. Like someone who'd already seen the end of the galaxy and couldn't unsee it. One of the recruits whispered, "What's wrong with him?" Another answered, "He hears the warp." We all went quiet, because we knew what the warp did to people. We'd seen the training vids. We'd heard the sermons. We'd listened as priests told us that every whisper from the void was a lie, and every truth was worse. The Psyker started shaking. Not physically, his soul shook first. Then came the sound, a whimper, a breath, a whisper of terror. Then a scream, high-pitched, raw, animal, not words, not language, just the sound of a mind being dragged across broken glass. He screamed again, and again, until his throat bled. The chains rattled. Someone yelled, "Make him stop." But we all knew no one could. He wasn't dreaming. He was bleeding thought into places thought should never go. One of the veterans, the only one among us with a scar that looked like a lass burn, spoke softly. "Leave him be. If he screams, it means he's still fighting." I didn't know if that was comforting or horrifying, maybe both. We tried to ignore him. We couldn't. Not with every scream reminding us that we were heading somewhere far worse than this metal tomb. The warp torches flickered. Their glow pulsed. The shadows moved, but not with the motion of the carrier. They moved with intent. Something brushed the edge of my vision. Something long, something wrong. But when I turned, it was gone, or hadn't been there, or was waiting. The psyker wasn't screaming anymore. He was laughing, softly, like a child, like he knew something we didn't. And in a way, he did. Above the noise, in the dim glow, someone began talking. A rumor, a story, a whispered truth. They say the front's lost. No, it's not. Command says we're reinforcing a victory. Command lies. They always lie. They say the sky is red with blood. They say the ground moves. They say the dead don't stay dead. They say chaos is there. Orcs. Tyranids. No, something worse. Rumors were the only thing alive in that transport. Rumors and fear. The engine throbbed again. We were moving faster now. The walls around us felt tighter, like the metal itself wanted to crush us. The psyker stopped laughing. He whispered something, barely audible, but we all heard it anyway. You shouldn't have come. One of the recruits snapped. Shut up, we don't have a choice. The psyker turned his head, so slowly it was unnatural.
His eyes were wrong.
Too wide, too bright, too aware. Of course you had a choice, he said. You just made the wrong one. Silence. Total. Absolute. Then the transport hit something. Or maybe something hit us. Hard. The impact threw bodies into walls. Helmets cracked. Teeth broke. Someone's arm snapped with a sound I'll never forget. The lights died. For 3 seconds, there was nothing. Not even breathing. Then the warp torches flared back to life. Redder than before. Blood red. Panic spread through us like fire through oil. Men drew their bayonets. Others reached instinctively for laser guns that weren't there. Our weapons would be issued planetside. The metal walls screamed. Not the machine. The walls. Like something was clawing them from the other side. A voice whispered, Emperor, save us. Another answered, He won't. I checked my brand. The scar burned. Like something was remembering it. Claiming it. Claiming me. We were thrown forward again as the transport banked hard left, then right, then left. A descent pattern. We were landing. Too fast. Too rough. We weren't being delivered. We were being fired at a battlefield like ammo. The psyker spoke again. This time he wasn't whispering. This time we all heard him clearly. He's waiting. Someone shouted. Who? The psyker's voice cracked. The one who eats hope. Then, for the first time, the commissar spoke. He'd been silent the entire journey. Silent through screams. Silent through panic. Silent through fear. Now he spoke 2 words. Brace yourselves. The transport hit ground. Metal screamed. We were thrown against each other, helmets cracking, bones bruising, breath knocked out of lungs. We stopped. The rear hatch blew open. Not opened. Blew. Smoke rushed in. Screams followed. The first sound I heard outside was lasfire. The second was something howling. The third was a voice I didn't recognize, screeching, Out! Move! Move or die! We stumbled from darkness into hell, sky on fire, ground shaking, air thick with smoke and burning flesh, bodies everywhere, some still alive, some missing limbs, some still crawling, some praying, some screaming. A sergeant pointed forward. That way. Go. Form up. Now. I couldn't move. Not at first. Because I saw something they never told us. Something no training vid showed. Something no chaplain warned of. The front wasn't a battle. It was a graveyard that had learned how to scream. No trenches. No fortifications. Just death in motion. And us, freshly branded, barely trained, already broken, marching straight into it like we had a choice. We didn't. We had been fed into a machine that needed blood to keep turning. Someone pushed me. Move, Hale! I ran. Not for the Emperor, not for glory. Not even because I wanted to live. I ran because something worse than death was waiting behind me. And something worse than that was waiting ahead. No one told us the truth. Not about war. Not about the enemy. Not about what it meant to be God. All they said was, the Emperor protects. And we believed it. We had to. But now I knew better. Because when I stepped onto that burning soil and saw what was really waiting for us, one thought cut through the noise. One truth stronger than prayer. No one told us the truth about the front. The dropship was shaking before we even hit atmosphere. Not turbulence, not engine strain, artillery. We were still in the sky and already being shelled. Every explosion outside rattled the hull like something was trying to tear us out of the air and devour us. The lights flickered, the walls groaned, someone vomited. Someone else prayed. The sergeant screamed orders none of us could hear. Didn't matter, we could all feel it. This wasn't a landing. This was a crash waiting for the ground to catch up. A voice came over the vox. Calm, mechanical, dead. Prepare for combat deployment. Impact imminent. We held on to whatever we could. Ceiling straps, seat frames, each other. The dropship lurched sideways. Sparks exploded from the ceiling. One of the new recruits screamed, "We're gonna die!" The commissar stood perfectly still. If you die screaming, you die a coward. We hit the ground, not landing, slamming. Steel screamed, metal twisted. Several men flew from their harnesses and shattered against the walls, necks at angles that don't allow breathing. We didn't have time to check if they were alive. The hatch blew open. Heat rushed in. Smoke poured through the gap, black and choking, tasting like burning metal and old blood. The air was thick with ash. Every breath felt like inhaling knives. And then we stepped out onto another world. A chaos world. My first. My last if fate was cruel. And fate is always cruel in the Guard. The ground wasn't ground. It was mud mixed with ash and bone. Every step sank ankle deep. Some places deeper. The sky wasn't sky. It was red and alive, veined with warp lightning that flickered like veins throbbing under skin. The air wasn't just hot. It howled, like it remembered every scream ever made on this soil. Artillery shells exploded all around us. Some Imperial, some traitor, some wrong. The kind that didn't explode, but unfolded into things with too many teeth. Our landing zone wasn't cleared. It was a graveyard in progress. Tanks burned in the distance, Lehman Russ chassis split open like gutted animals. Chimera troop carriers half submerged in black sludge. Piles of bodies, some in guard flak armor, some in rusted chaos plate, some stripped of anything human. A Vox officer shouted, 97th Rifles, form up, move, move, move. We tried. Throne help us, we tried. But the moment we stepped into the open, the sky screamed. A shell landed 20 meters away. Not shrapnel, shockwave. The blast hit us like a giant's fist. The ground jumped. My ears went numb. I felt myself flying. then slamming back into the bloody mud face first. My mouth filled with dirt, copper, and something soft I didn't want to identify. Someone was yelling my name. "Hale, get up! Move!" It was Bren, my squad mate, my friend. He grabbed me by the shoulder and hauled me to my feet. Then, before I could even thank him, before I could even see his face, something hit him. Not a bullet, not shrapnel, a piece of someone else. A guard helmet, with a head still inside. It struck him with a sick, wet sound. And just like that, Bren dropped. No body left. Just a red shape sinking into the mud. One moment a friend. The next, nothing. I didn't even have time to grieve. "Keep moving," the sergeant bellowed. And so I moved. We all did. Because the ones who stopped didn't stay standing long. Lass fire lit up the smoke, red beams streaking toward us from somewhere ahead. Not straight lines, twisted, corrupted, writhing like they were alive. Someone screamed, "Traitor guard." Someone else shouted, "No, cultists." A third voice cried, "What does it matter? Shoot them!" Our laser guns hummed. We fired blindly into the haze. Shadows fell. Others rose. A figure with too many eyes screamed something that wasn't language and rushed us with a rusted blade. 2 guardsmen shot him. He kept running. 3 more shot him. He kept running. The 6th shot finally melted half his skull, and he laughed while he fell. Chaos is not just the enemy. It's a reminder that sanity is optional out here. We pushed forward, step by agonizing step. Mud sucking at our boots, artillery hammering from above, the sky bleeding light, voices whispering nonsense in our ears, or maybe in our thoughts. Someone kept reciting prayer. Someone else kept laughing. Too loud. Too long. He wasn't shot. He just walked away, still laughing. We never saw him again. The Sarge pointed to a broken wall of ferrocrete. "There, cover, move." We scrambled behind it, panting, shaking, coated in filth and blood that wasn't ours. The commissar was still calm. His coat was clean, his face unreadable. He surveyed the battlefield, eyes like stone, jaw clenched, one hand already resting on his sidearm. He finally spoke. "This is war, not the pamphlets, not the hymns, not the stories." He turned toward us. "If you live through this, you are guardsmen. If you die..." He paused. A shell hit somewhere behind us. Someone screamed. Someone didn't finish screaming. He continued. "Then you are remembered by the Emperor." A single voice, I don't know who, muttered, "Does he even hear us?" The commissar didn't smile. He didn't blink. He simply said, "He hears the dead." Another explosion shook the earth. We pushed onward, past corpses still steaming, past tanks burning from the inside, past men who clutched their rosaries even after death. We were fresh, unproven, just another wave of bodies to delay the inevitable. A world like this doesn't get saved.
It just gets fed.
And we were the feed. I looked at where Bren had fallen. There was nothing left to bury. No helmet, no tag, just mud, smoke, blood, and a sky that screamed like a wounded god. The sergeant yelled for us to advance. I took one last breath of burning air and stepped forward. Not because I was brave, not because the Emperor loved me, but because I didn't want to be next. That's when I understood the truth. The whispered one. The one they don't teach in training. The commissar's voice echoed in my head. The Emperor protects. They always say it. They never finish the sentence. So I did. Right then. Right there. Standing in the mud of a dying world, surrounded by bodies, smoke, and horrors wearing stolen flesh. I finally said the rest. The Emperor protects. Everyone else dies. We learned something very quickly on that world. You don't get used to the taste, not of the air, not of the mud, not of the dead, and certainly not of the rations. The first time I opened one, I thought something had gone wrong. A storage failure, a chemical spill, a mistake in the supply chain. But no, it was supposed to taste like that. Bitter, metallic, chalky, like someone had ground old bone into paste and fed it to us in the shape of a meal. We ate it anyway. Because hunger was worse. Food wasn't nourishment here, just fuel to keep our bodies moving toward the next horror. Some men gagged, others forced it down. One recruit sat in the mud, staring at his ration bar, whispering, "It's not food, it's not food, it's not food." The commissar walked past him. Didn't say a word, didn't need to. The boy forced himself to swallow it, because the Emperor's mercy wasn't here. Only hunger, only fear, only the sound of artillery, always in the distance, sometimes too close to ignore. We didn't sleep, not really. We closed our eyes when our bodies demanded it. We drifted. We tried. But rest never came. Every time I started to drift off, a scream would yank me back. Sometimes it was real, a man torn apart by something in the dark. Sometimes it was just in my head. It didn't matter which. We slept with one eye open, one hand on our laser gun, and the gas mask always strapped to our face. Always. No exceptions. Someone tried to take his off the first night, just to breathe air that didn't smell like rubber and panic. He got a lungful of chemical ash. He lasted 9 seconds, collapsed before he could scream. His lips turned black. His eyes burst. We buried him in a trench, not out of respect, but because we needed the space. From then on, the masks never came off. We slept in them, ate in them, marched in them. We forgot what our own breath smelled like, forgot the shape of our own faces, forgot what it meant to feel air that didn't burn. Hours blended into days. Days blended into something worse, something without a name. We stopped using time. We used survival. Remember when Ral got hit? Right. That was 2 deaths ago. I think this is day 3. Doesn't matter anymore. The sky never changed. Always red, always bruised, always bleeding light. And we kept moving, just like the sergeant said. The ones who stop don't restart. He was right. We saw proof of that. One guardsman sat down beside a burnt-out chimera and closed his eyes. He said he just needed a minute. A single minute. He got 3. Long enough for something to crawl out of the mud. Something with too many fingers and not enough face. When we found him, he was still sitting, still breathing, but not alive, not anymore. We stopped counting deaths, stopped speaking names, stopped remembering faces. We just kept walking. We tried to eat again. Didn't taste like food anymore. It tasted like the world trying to kill us from the inside. We chewed it in silence, eyes on the horizon, laser guns in hand. Someone said, "This planet hates us." Someone else whispered, "Everything here hates us." He was wrong. It wasn't hate. It was hunger. The air was hungry. The ground was hungry. The dead were hungry. And the sky was the worst of all. That day, something changed. Small at first. Barely noticeable. A shifting in the light. A tremor in the air. Then came the hallucinations. Or maybe they weren't hallucinations. You stop knowing where the line is. One man started laughing because he said the clouds were spelling his name. Another swore the mud was whispering secrets. Secrets only he could hear. Secrets he needed to share. He didn't get the chance. The commissar shot him through the mask. "No madness," he said. "We can't afford it." But it was already too late. Whatever sanity we brought with us was already rotting, like flesh left too long in the sun. The psyker was the first to break. He sat in the mud, rocking, shaking, muttering, "They're here, they're here, they're here." The sergeant shook him. "Who's here?" The psyker blinked, eyes unfocused, voice shaking. "The ones who don't bleed." "We didn't know what that meant." "Not yet. We would. Soon." We kept marching, because there was nowhere to stay. In the distance, a ruin burned, fire climbing the stone like it wanted to escape gravity. Someone spoke, "If we die here, does anyone even know?" Silence. Someone else answered, "Does anyone care?" No one replied. We already knew the answer. Night fell, or whatever passed for night here. The ash got thicker, made the air taste like rust and rot. The sky turned darker, not black, but something worse. A bruised color, a wounded color, a sick color. We huddled in a crater, the closest thing we had to shelter. Our masks stayed on, our guns stayed loaded, our hearts stayed afraid. The sergeant tried to sound brave. "We hold here. Dawn will..." He stopped, because we all heard it. We all felt it. The sky was breathing. A low sound, a rumble. We looked up. At first nothing, just darkness. Then the darkness moved. The clouds didn't drift. They twisted, like something was inside them. Something trying to push through. Something enormous. The psyker started whimpering. He pressed both hands to his mask. "No, no, 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 no." Someone whispered, "What is it?" He didn't answer with words. He screamed. The ground shook. The sky pulsed. The air vibrated, like it was alive, trying to speak. Lightning forked across the clouds. Not white, not blue, blood red. And then, the sky screamed, not metaphoric, not poetic. The sky screamed, a sound so loud it rattled teeth, so sharp it cut the air, so deep it shook the soul. We covered our ears. It didn't matter. The sound went inside us. It echoed through bone. It lived in blood. It settled behind the eyes. Men dropped their laser guns. Some dropped their minds. The psyker curled into a ball and sobbed. The commissar didn't speak. Couldn't. No one could. Because that scream wasn't just noise. It was recognition. It was calling us by name. We thought we had seen the worst. We thought we understood this world. We thought we knew fear. We were wrong. The sky had just introduced itself. And it was hungry too. That night, the sky screamed back. The officers told us we were winning. Not with pride, not with conviction. With scripted confidence, like they'd memorized the line 1,000 times and were too tired to change the words. A Vox broadcast crackled through the smoke-thick air. Imperial forces remain in total control. Enemy is scattered. Victory is assured. We listened from the mud, knees in blood, helmets dented, masks fogged with the heat of our own breath. Total control. Victory assured. Half my squad was already dead. The rest were dying slowly, but command said we were winning. So we were. Because reality bends to orders. That's the lie we're supposed to swallow. We huddled behind the burnt hull of a destroyed chimera. The metal was still hot, still smoking, still stinking of melted paint and cooked bodies. Someone found teeth fused into the side panel. No one said anything. These days, silence was easier. Then someone broke it. Trooper Janek. He was never the smart one. He was never the careful one. But he still believed the words the officers said. He lifted his mask and whispered, "If we're winning, why does every night get worse?" Nobody answered, not at first. We stared into the smoke, listening to lasfire and distant screaming, both constant, both familiar. The sky pulsed red again, chaos lightning, warp storms, gods laughing where no gods should exist. Janek continued, "If we're winning, why are we still here? If we're winning, why can't we retreat? If we're winning, why does nobody come back?" Still, nobody responded. Not because we disagreed. Because we agreed too much. The commissar was standing 10 meters away, boots clean, coat spotless, posture perfect. He heard every word. He always did. Officers lie, but commissars, they correct. He turned, slow, deliberate, like a man taking pleasure in the performance of inevitability. He stepped toward us, each boot heel hitting cratered ground like a metronome counting down a life. We all stood, not because we feared him, because we feared what would happen if we didn't. Janek froze. He didn't breathe, didn't blink. The commissar stopped in front of him, removed his gloves, folded them calmly, tucked them beneath his belt, then spoke, "Trooper." Janek swallowed. "Yes, commissar." The commissar's voice was cold, flat, something carved from iron, not born from flesh. "You questioned the status of the campaign. It's just that you questioned the orders of command. I only meant..." The commissar drew his bolt pistol. Heavy, perfect, holy to some, death incarnate to the rest. Janek's eyes widened behind his mask. "Wait, please. And you doubted the Emperor's will?" He fired once. Bolt round. No blood left to spill. Janek simply ceased being. The laser gun dropped first, then what was left of the body, then silence. The commissar holstered the weapon, then turned and calmly said, "We are winning. That is all that matters." No one spoke. Not one of us. Not even a breath louder than a whisper of the ash wind. We slept in a crater that night. Or tried to. The air was toxic. The ground was shaking. The sky was screaming again. But the worst thing, the worst, was the false hope. The constant lie. The whispered command. "We're winning." I used to believe it. In training. They fed us victory posters, propaganda hymns, images of heroes smiling as they raised the Aquila, banners waving, guns raised, bright light all around them. They never show the mud, or the trenches, or the screaming sky, or the bodies stacked like ration crates. Victory looks like glory in posters. Victory smells like rot and promethium here. We moved at dawn, or whatever passes for dawn when the sky is filled with ash and warp light. Orders came through, advance 300 meters. Hold ground. We advanced 10, lost 3 men, advanced 5 more, lost 2 more. By the time we reached 30 meters, the sergeant called halt. No one argued. A man nearby was crying, softly, barely audible through the mask. He was holding something. Not a weapon, not a charm. A ration tin, empty. I realized why he wept. Not for the food, for what it meant. No survivors lived long enough to starve here. We regrouped near a half-collapsed ruin, a shrine once, now a pile of bone and screaming stone. It still had an Aquila, upside down, bleeding, staring at us with blind wings. One man fell to his knees and prayed. He didn't get back up, not because the enemy killed him, because faith isn't shelter. Faith is a mirror, and this world breaks mirrors. The officers said we were winning, but the only thing we conquered was our own breaking point. Later, the Vox crackled again. Imperium Secundus Command reports enemy forces in retreat. Victory is assured. All units advance and secure glory in the Emperor's name. A guardsman with half his face burned off laughed until he choked, then sobbed. Another tried to stand. He made it 3 steps before falling, not shot, not bleeding, just collapsing under the weight of the lie. The commissar didn't shoot that one. He didn't have to. The war would finish the job for him.
We didn't advance.
Couldn't. The guns never stopped. The sky never cleared. The dead never stayed where we left them. We weren't pushing forward. We weren't gaining ground. We weren't winning anything. We were surviving the next minute, and that was the only kind of victory that mattered. I sat in the mud, back against a piece of ruined wall, laser gun across my knees. The barrel was warm, too warm. I hadn't fired in hours, but the gun was trembling. Or maybe I was. The sergeant crouched beside me. He didn't look at me. He didn't have to. He just said, "They always say we're winning." His voice was sandpaper, chewed glass, exhaustion pretending to be courage. "Are we?" I asked. He didn't answer, didn't blink, just stared into the smoke, watching shapes move through it. Shapes that weren't men, shapes that weren't alive, shapes that were waiting. Finally, he said, "We weren't sent here to win." I turned. He met my eyes, and in that moment he told me the truth. The one no officer ever would. The one no commissar could allow spoken. The one every guardsman learns too late. We weren't soldiers. We were fuel. They always tell you the same thing in training. The worst part is waiting. They don't tell you what comes after. They don't tell you the waiting never ends, even when the killing starts. We'd heard them for days. Whispers in the smoke, metal scraping against metal, voices chanting in languages that felt like they were chewing at your sanity, traitor hymns, corrupted prayers. Then silence, not peace, the wrong kind of silence, the kind where even the guns hesitate, the kind where the ground is holding its breath. The sergeant tensed. "Something's coming," the psyker whispered. "They're close." Someone asked, "How close?" He didn't answer with words. He just pointed. That's when we saw them, shapes in the smoke. Dozens at first, then hundreds, then too many to count. Their armor was once Imperial, once holy, once ours, now warped, spiked, painted with symbols that hurt to look at. Some still wore the Aquila, broken, turned upside down, defaced with symbols that shouldn't exist. Traitor Guard. Our own, but not anymore. The sergeant spoke. "Hold your fire." Someone whispered, "Throne, help us." Someone else, "Do they still feel pain?" No one answered. Then they charged. No speech, no formation, no warning. Just a human wave of hatred, sprinting through mud, screaming like animals, firing autoguns as they ran. Autoguns versus laser guns, metal projectiles versus beams of light. It didn't matter. Everything kills if it hits flesh. We opened fire. The air lit up instantly. Las fire streaked across the battlefield, red bolts cutting down shadows. Autogun rounds tore the ground around us, kicked mud into the air, chewed through armor. The first bullet hit Merrick. He didn't fall. He didn't scream. He just stopped moving, like someone had turned him off. He was still upright when the second round hit him. Then he folded into the mud, dead before I could call his name. We kept firing. There was no time to mourn, no time to breathe. Just targets, just movement, just death. They kept coming, some firing wildly, some laughing. One of them was carrying a severed lasgun barrel like a club. Another had nails hammered into his own armor, blood still dripping. Some still wore Imperial rank markings. One still had his Cadian regiment patch. He saw us and screamed, "Brothers!" Not as a greeting, not as a plea, as a curse. He fired into us, full auto, and the rounds tore Loran in half. The mud boiled. Not from heat, from blood. The ground was so wet with death that steam rose every time a fresh body fell. Plasma and blood. Fire and water. Flesh turning into mist. Bren should have been here.
He died before all this.
He was lucky. I saw one of them break through the line, sprinting across the death field like a man who'd forgotten fear. His mask was cracked. His face was exposed, dirty, scarred, human. I aimed center mass, but I hesitated, just for a second, because I saw his eyes. They were brown, just brown, like any guardsman, like mine. He screamed, "I was you!" And he meant it. A week ago, a year ago, he might have stood beside me, eating the same ration bars, reciting the same oath. Now he was charging me with a bayonet made from a broken shovel. I fired. Once. Twice. The beam punched through his chest. He didn't fall at first. He staggered, looked down, touched the hole, then looked up at me and smiled. It wasn't a chaos smile, not a wicked smile, a sad one, like he was relieved, like death was better than what he'd become. He fell at my feet. The battle kept going, but I stared at him because I knew he hadn't been born a traitor. He was made one, by war, by madness, by the same machine that made me guard. More came, dozens, hundreds, too many. We fired until packs overheated, until lasguns jammed, until our fingers blistered inside our gloves. One of them rushed Varn and tackled him into the mud. They wrestled, fists, elbows, teeth, rage. No discipline, no training, just feral survival. Varn screamed. The traitor screamed louder. I didn't have a clear shot. I fired anyway. They both stopped moving. The sergeant didn't yell at me. He didn't need to. He'd have done the same. War doesn't leave room for clean choices. Another wave. Another scream. Another volley. And then silence, smoke, mud. Bodies everywhere. Most of them not whole. Steam rose in places where blood met heat. Even the dead still twitched, nerves firing, muscles refusing to accept the end. Someone sat down, took off his helmet, stared at nothing. "Are we done?" No one answered. The psyker was crying quietly, not loudly, not broken, just softly, like someone who had seen the future and wished he hadn't. The commissar walked past the bodies. He didn't react, not to the gore, not to the smell, not to the fact that some of the dead were wearing the same uniform he did. He simply said, "Advance." Because that's what we do. We advance. We kill. We die. We keep doing it, over and over, until someone runs out of bodies. We moved forward through the corpses. They made a sound when we stepped on them. Not a squish, a sigh, like the battlefield itself was tired. We passed the man I'd shot, the one who smiled. His eyes were open, still staring at the sky, still brown, still human. I stopped, just long enough to whisper something I hoped the wind would carry. "I'm sorry." Then I kept walking. Because I had to. Because survival doesn't forgive hesitation. Because out here, mercy is suicide. And because the war doesn't care how I feel. It only cares that I keep killing. Even if the next person I kill was once one of us. The sergeant barked orders. The commissar walked ahead. The psycho wiped his eyes. And I just kept moving. My laser gun was hot in my hands. My mask was fogged. My heart was heavier than my armor. And my thoughts were darker than the sky. Because I finally understood something I never wanted to know. The enemy wasn't alien. The enemy wasn't chaos. The enemy wasn't the other side. The enemy was just us. Twisted, broken, left out in the dark too long. And eventually, something whispers. And eventually, something answers. A voice, a promise, a lie, a curse. I didn't feel victorious. I didn't feel righteous. I didn't even feel alive. Just empty, just tired, just one step closer to becoming what I'd just killed. Because war doesn't make heroes. War makes copies. It grinds men into more men who will kill men. Who kill men? Who kill men? Until nothing is left but ghosts wearing uniforms, and ash where history used to live. I didn't want to think anymore. So I walked, and reloaded, and whispered a truth no officer would ever admit. I killed a man who called me brother. We were supposed to advance by dawn. We never made it. Somewhere between the push and the screaming, between the smoke and the blood, between the shells and the dead, we got cut off. No man's land. That's what they call it. Wrong name. Men die here all the time. Just none live long enough for it to matter. We were pinned down in a shallow depression, barely deep enough to hide a crouched body. The ground was uneven, slick, not from rain, from blood. Old blood, new blood. Blood that didn't belong to anything recognizable anymore. The air was too quiet, not silent, just waiting. Waiting is worse. Waiting makes your thoughts louder. Waiting makes your fears real. The sergeant had stopped giving orders. The Vox was dead. Power cell cracked. Probably from when Vark took a round through the throat and fell on it. We didn't move his body. There was no reason to. The commissar wasn't with us. We lost him hours ago. Either he died or he found better soldiers. Either way, we were alone. 6 of us left. Maybe 7. It was hard to tell which shapes were still breathing. Night fell without warning. The sky didn't fade into darkness. It sank into it. No stars, no moon, just void. A darkness that felt thick, hungry, like it had weight. Once, I thought night meant rest. Now I know better. Night is when this world remembers it is dying. Night is when the ground tries to pull you in. Night is when the dead speak. And they did. The first scream came from 20 meters ahead. A corpse. We had seen it earlier. What was left of it? Half armor, half exposed rib cage, half a face twisted in terror. It wasn't breathing. It was barely intact. But now it screamed. A wet, bubbling cry ripped from a throat that shouldn't exist anymore. Help! Then silence. Not a cut-off scream. More like it ran out of memory. Or permission. Trooper Selen whispered, "That's not possible." Trooper Ilrin whispered back, "Nothing here cares about possible anymore." The ground shifted. Not wind. Not movement. Just shifting. Like something underneath was rolling over in its sleep. We heard more screams. Some far, some near, some too close, all from the dead. Or what used to be dead. We stayed low. We stayed still. We didn't talk anymore. Talking might mean listening, and listening is worse than dying. Then came the whispers, first like wind, then like voices, then like something inside our helmets. Not outside, inside. Words we didn't understand, but felt, like teeth scraping the back of your skull. Trooper Halray started muttering, "Don't answer, don't answer, don't answer." We didn't know what he meant. Then we did. A whisper came, not to all of us, just to me. A voice like oil poured through a crack in reality. Hale. I froze. My name shouldn't be here. My name shouldn't be known. Hale, you survived. Good. Good. Stay awake. Stay alive. You still belong to us. US. Not the Imperium, not the Guard, not humanity. Something else, something wrong. I kept my breathing slow. I didn't answer. I didn't dare. Next to me, Trooper Roll was shaking. He whispered, "Did you hear it? They're talking to us." Salen elbowed him. "Shut it. They're not talking. It's just the warp." Ilren whispered, "That's worse." And it was. We heard footsteps. Slow. Dragging.
Not walking.
Dragging. Something was moving through the corpses. Testing the ground. Learning the shape of us. Not by sight. By memory. Trooper Veln gripped his laser gun. Finger shaking. Eyes wide. He started to rise. The sergeant grabbed him and pulled him down. "You fire. We die." He wasn't wrong. Our guns weren't weapons out here. They were invitations. A faint glow began to rise from the far side of the trench field. Warp light. Sickly, oily, rippling through the air like heat off metal. In that glow, we could see them better. The corpses. The ones we thought were still. The ones we thought were dead. Some were moving. Not rising. Not attacking, just turning their heads toward us, slowly, like marionettes dragged by invisible strings. Their eyes glowed faintly, not light, not life, recognition, as if something behind their eyes had been watching from the moment they fell, watching us now. Ilren whispered, "This place isn't a battlefield, it's a mouth." He was right. The ground beneath us felt soft. Too soft. The corpse we were leaning on shifted slightly. Not from wind. From pressure. Like the soil underneath was breathing. Rats emerged from the mud, not scared, not frantic. Calm. Dozens. Maybe hundreds. Fat from feeding. Their eyes glowed red in the warp light. They crawled over the bodies, into open wounds, under armor, chewing, eating, feasting on the dead without hesitation. One rat stopped, looked at me, stared, unblinking, like it was deciding when I'd be next. Ral snapped. Something inside him came apart. He stood up, too fast. He ripped off his mask and screamed, "Come on, come and take me." The night answered. A voice, not human, not demon, not alive, whispered back. Already did. His eyes rolled white. He fell. He didn't get back up. We didn't touch him. We didn't dare. Because whatever killed him didn't need claws. It needed access. The sergeant finally spoke. Quiet. Controlled. Like a man stepping over the edge and pretending there was still ground. "We hold until dawn." Salen whispered, "Will dawn even come here?" The sergeant didn't answer. He didn't have to. We all knew. Dawn wasn't promised. Survival wasn't promised. Death wasn't even promised. Not here, not anymore. Time passed. Or maybe it died. The sky trembled, the ground shifted, the voices kept whispering. And we stayed still. Fear wasn't the enemy. Movement was. Breathing was. Thinking was. And that's when I felt it. Not sound. Not vision. Contact. Direct. Unavoidable. Something touched my mind. There's a moment in every war where time ceases to mean anything. For us, it happened during the barrage. It started at dawn, or what passed for dawn. The sky didn't brighten. It just changed color. Bruised gray like a dying eye. We had maybe 4 minutes of quiet, just enough to notice it, just enough to pray it might last. Then the first shell landed, and the world broke. No, artillery isn't loud. Not really. Not at first. It's everything. It's the ground shaking so violently, it feels like your bones are cracking. It's the air going from heavy to sharp in a blink. It sounds so massive it comes through your teeth, your chest, your spine, not through your ears. The first shell hit 50 meters away. Soil erupted, metal shattered. Bodies became pieces. We took cover, if you can call digging your face into the corpse-filled mud cover. The second shell landed closer. Someone screamed, but only for half a second. Then he stopped, not because he died, because the third shell hit, and no one could hear anything anymore. The barrage kept going. Minutes, hours, days. We lost track fast. The sergeant tried to give orders at first, but what's the point of shouting over Godfire? We huddled in craters that were cratered again and again, until the holes themselves became trenches. Or graves, sometimes both. We stuffed mud in our ears. It didn't matter. Eardrums burst anyway. Blood ran down our necks. When we spoke, if we spoke, the words were vibrations instead of sound. Ral kept mouthing, "I can't hear, I can't hear, I can't hear." We never heard him. Artillery does something to the soul. The first few hours you're terrified. The next you're numb. After that, you start hoping one lands on you. Not out of bravery, out of exhaustion. Because at least it would end something. The shells stopped falling for 2 seconds at one point. Just long enough for Trooper Gannis to stand up. He thought the barrage was over. He was wrong. A shell hit directly on top of him. No blood, no body. Just nothing. One moment, man. Next moment, absence. That's all. The ground shook so much we forgot what stillness was. The sky lit with bursts of fire so often I forgot what night looked like, or day, or anything that wasn't war. Every time the barrage paused, someone tried to speak, and every time they did, a new shell answered. By hour 20, no one spoke at all. We communicated with looks, with glances, with the slight tilt of a lasgun barrel, and even that felt too loud. We ran out of water, out of rations, out of words. We didn't run out of fear. Fear fed itself. Fear didn't need supply lines. At some point, I don't remember when, I lifted my head over the edge of the crater. A mistake. Not because of the shells, because I saw what was left of the battlefield. There was no battlefield. There was just ruin. Tanks ripped open like canned meat. Bodies without limbs. Limbs without bodies. Mud so thick with iron it clung to the skin like armor. A man staggered through the smoke, holding half of someone else's torso. Not screaming, not crying, just carrying it, like he didn't know what else to do. A shell landed beside him, and then he was gone too. The air turned into metal dust, fine enough to breathe, sharp enough to scar the lungs. Every breath tasted like rust. Every exhale tasted like blood. I lost track of who was still alive. I lost track of who I was. Names meant nothing. Ranks meant nothing. Only the shell that had not yet landed mattered. Only the one still coming. Always coming. At one point, the psyker sat up, eyes wide, face slack. He mouthed something. We couldn't hear it. We never would. A shell hit near him. Only his mask landed in our trench, still intact, still staring. We slept in seconds. If we slept, micro-deaths. Blinking out of existence just long enough to forget where we were, then waking up again to thunder, earth, fire, always fire. By hour 30, I could no longer tell if the shells were real. I thought I was hallucinating. Then I realized it didn't matter. Real or not, they still killed. Time kept passing, but time wasn't ours anymore. It belonged to the artillery, to the guns, to the endless grinding truth of this place. If the shells don't kill you, they wear you down enough that something else will. I remember watching Trooper Kell hold his helmet in his hands, staring at it like he'd never seen one before. He looked at me, eyes empty, and mouthed, "This isn't war, this is harvest." Then a shell landed 5 meters away. He disappeared. The helmet stayed. Useless. Alone. We were down to 4, or 5, or 3. Numbers didn't matter anymore. We weren't a squad. We were survivors. And survival was an insult to everything around us. We finally got orders. Not through Vox. Not through command. Through the sergeant's broken lips. Advance, when it stops. But it didn't stop. It never stopped. Not fully. Not long enough to move. Not long enough to breathe. Not long enough to hope. The barrage kept going. 36 hours. 36 hours of death falling from the sky like rain in hell. 36 hours of thunder so loud it made memory itself painful. 36 hours of watching friends die without bodies left to mourn. No tags, no graves, no last words. Just names we'd never be allowed to speak again. And then, at some point, something changed. I don't know when, but it did. I lifted my head, slow, careful, terrified, and I realized there was no sky anymore, only fire. They told us the medici tents were safe. They lied. Nothing is safe in war, especially not the places built to save you. The first thing I noticed wasn't the blood. It was the smell, thick, heavy, metallic, the scent of iron that clung to the lungs, mixed with rot, mixed with sweat, mixed with something sour and chemical that half covered the truth, but never hid it. We entered because we had no choice. Ral was bleeding out, arm shredded, bone exposed, Lasburn still smoking. He wasn't screaming anymore. That was the bad sign. Men howling still had strength to survive. Men silent were already halfway gone. The tent flap opened and a wall of sound hit us. Not a battle. A mass butchery. Las cauterizers hissing. Bone saws screeching, stitching hooks pulling flesh shut. Priests chanting litanies meant to comfort but spoken like funeral rites. We stepped inside, and hell got smaller, more intimate. There were rows of tables, if you could call them that. Metal slabs, stained brown, blood pooling underneath. Some men still had faces, some didn't. Bodies shook, twitched, seized, died. One medic whispered, "Next," as if he were taking ration orders. He wasn't cruel, just numb. Too numb to flinch when someone's leg came off in the wrong direction. We set Ral down. A medic glanced at him, then turned away. "He's low priority." I grabbed him by the coat. "He's dying." The medic met my eyes, saw the desperation, the fear, the truth. So is everyone else. He wasn't wrong. There were dozens, maybe hundreds. Men missing limbs, men missing eyes, men missing half their bodies but still breathing. Most didn't survive long. Some did. They were the unlucky ones. There was no anesthetic. None left. Not even local numbing agents. Just belts to bite down on, or a hand to hold, or nothing at all. The saw came out when the priest arrived. Not before. And not because the priest mattered. Because they needed someone to blame. Someone to hear the screaming. Someone to pretend it meant something. We watched a man get his leg cut off at the hip. He begged at first. Then he demanded. Then he cursed the Emperor. And then he screamed. The kind of scream that rips itself free of the soul, not the throat. The saw hit bone. Bone splintered. Blood sprayed. The priest prayed louder. The man screamed louder still. When it was done, he went quiet. Not because he fainted. Because he died. The priest closed his eyes and whispered a blessing.
The medici pushed the body aside and shouted,
"Next!" And the next man was already waiting. We backed away from the cutting tables, kept Ral near us, kept his arm elevated, kept pressure on the wound. We had no faith it mattered. Faith had no place in a room like this. Faith was something given to men who still believed they'd make it back home. There was no home now, just war, just blood, just the saw. Bodies were stacked in the corner, not covered, not tagged, not named, just piled, torso to torso, head against a leg, hand against a back, like crates unloaded in a warehouse, a logistical problem waiting for a solution. One medici wiped sweat from his brow, using a rag stained so deep with blood it would never be clean again. He looked at us. He didn't ask if we were wounded, didn't ask if Ral could be saved. He asked the only question that matters here. Can he still fight? I shook my head. He nodded, not sadly, just knowingly. The decision was made. Before I could protest, another medic hauled Ral away. Not gently, not cruelly, just efficiently. We followed to where they placed him. Not a bed, not a stretcher. The floor, near the wall where the non-effective casualties went. The ones too injured to serve. The ones not worth the resources. The ones who would die soon. Ral looked up at me, his face pale, eyes glassy. He tried to speak, but his jaw trembled instead. I held his shoulder. "It's okay." I didn't believe it. Neither did he. But lies are a kind of mercy. Across the tent, a man was screaming, "I can still fight! I can still fight!" He was missing both legs. They strapped him down. He kept screaming anyway. The priest leaned over him, whispering, "Imperial scripture." But the man didn't hear it. His voice kept climbing. Higher, raw, madder. The medici injected something into his neck. He stopped struggling, not because it calmed him, because it killed him. The priest closed his eyes, whispered the same blessing again. "The Emperor receives you," then moved on. His voice was calm. His eyes were dead. I sat beside Ral while he faded. I didn't know what to say. What could I say? No one here wanted to hear about hope. No one believed in victory. We all knew the truth now. In the Guard, you don't die on the battlefield. You die in a tent that smells like metal and terror, while someone with a saw tries to save the next man who might last 5 minutes longer. Ral whispered something. I leaned close. Closer still. He said, "Tell them I didn't run." I nodded, even though there was no one left to tell. His breathing slowed, then stopped. I didn't close his eyes, didn't cover his body, didn't whisper a prayer. The medici dragged him away 3 minutes later. No ceremony, no goodbye, just another corpse added to the growing pile. The priest didn't bless him. He'd already done enough today, and tomorrow would be worse. When I finally stood up, I looked around the tent again. Blood on the floor, blood on the tools, blood on the ceiling, screams mixing with prayers, prayers mixing with orders, orders mixing with sobs. One giant human animal, wounded and dying, eating its own pain and calling it duty. They told us this was healing. They were wrong. This was recycling, turning broken flesh into empty space, making room for the next wave of bodies the war would gift us. Outside, artillery still shook the sky. Inside, the bone saw kept moving. The tent flaps opened again. More wounded arrived. More would die. More would be dragged away. And the war would keep going. Because that's what war does. It chews. And chews. And chews. Until no one is left who remembers anything else. When I left, I didn't look back. I didn't need to. The sound stayed with me. The smell too. Not just blood. Not just death. Something worse. Something deeper. Something permanent. It smelled like copper and fear. Night fell without stars. It always did. The sky was still burning somewhere beyond the smoke, but we didn't look at it anymore. Every time we did, it stared back. We'd moved behind the second line, not exactly safe, just less immediately suicidal. The artillery was distant, the screaming was muffled, the ground was only shaking every few minutes now. It almost felt quiet, almost. That's when the sergeant said, "Take an hour, eat, rest, write if you want." Write. As if words still meant something, as if paper mattered, as if anyone we missed was still alive. I sat against a shattered bunker wall, helmet off, laser gun propped at my side, mask hanging around my neck like a dead animal. My hands were shaking, not from fear, from exhaustion so deep it lived inside my bones. I pulled out a scrap of paper, not standard issue. It was torn from a field ration wrapper, stained, creased, smelled faintly of metal and burned protein paste. I pulled out a stick of charcoal. We used it to mark the dead. Now I was using it to write a letter to someone who would never see it. My sister, Lyra, she was 12 when I left. She asked me if war was heroic. I told her it was. I lied, just like everyone else did. I stared at the paper for a long time before writing the first word. Lyra, I stopped. My throat tightened. I tried again. Lyra, I don't know if you're alive. Too honest. Too real. I rubbed it out and wrote slower this time. Lyra, I hope you're safe. I pictured her face. It was harder than it should have been. Memory felt fragile here, like everything human was slowly rotting in the open air. I kept writing. We landed on a world I can't name. They don't tell us. Maybe they think it helps. It doesn't. The ground is mud. The air is poison. The sky is wrong. Everything here is wrong. We sleep in trenches filled with rain and blood. Some of it ours, some of it not. The men say we're winning. They always say that. I think they're lying, or maybe they believe it. I don't know which is worse. My hand hovered. What next? What truth? What lies? What hope? I wrote slowly. I miss home. Even the parts I hated. The cold nights, the ration lines, the sound of Arbite's boots on stone. It sounds peaceful now. Anything does compared to this. A shell landed far away, just close enough to remind us it wasn't over. One of the men flinched, another didn't even look up. We were changing, or dying, or both. I continued writing. There was a boy in my squad named Ral. He used to whistle before every battle, said it helped him focus. I never understood how. He lost his arm, then he lost the rest of him. We didn't bury him. We never bury anyone. There's no time. My fingers clenched around the charcoal until it snapped. I stared at the broken tip. A tool shattered from pressure, easy to replace, just like us. I took a breath. My chest hurt. Too much dust in the lungs. Too much fear. I kept writing anyway. I don't know how many of us are left. We don't say numbers anymore. We don't say names. We just keep moving. They say the Emperor is watching. Maybe he is. Maybe he turned away. Maybe he can't see through all the smoke. I paused. This wasn't a letter anymore. It was a confession, a grave marker, a goodbye, one that would never reach its destination. I wrote the part that hurt most. If I don't come back, don't think I failed. I tried. I fought. I survived as long as I could. And I never ran. My eyes burned, not from gas, from memory, from knowing I'd never see her again. I finished the letter. I love you. I always will. Garron. I folded it, pressed it flat, then looked at it for a long time. It was pointless. There was no courier service, no mail transport, no rear line to send it back to. Even if I survived this war, if I somehow saw another sunrise, Cadia might be gone, the galaxy might be gone, or I might be gone long before any of it mattered. But I kept it. We all kept them. Our letters, to wives, to brothers, to mothers long dead, to children who barely remembered our faces, to ourselves, to who we used to be. The man next to me, Boris, was writing too. He didn't have paper. He was carving words into a piece of laspak casing with his combat knife. To my son at the top, he didn't have to write the rest. We understood. Another guardsman to my left was muttering while he wrote. Not a letter, a prayer, still believing, still pretending, still hoping. Another was smiling, actually smiling, writing something meant to be read, meant to be held, meant to be delivered. He said, "When I get back, I'm going to read this to her myself." No one corrected him. No one laughed. No one told him the truth. We let him believe. Belief was all he had left, and maybe that was worth something. I looked at the folded paper in my hand. I didn't pray over it, didn't kiss it, didn't seal it. I just held it, because it was the last proof that I'd ever been more than this, more than a soldier, more than a number, more than a future corpse. Once I was Garron Hale of Casa Harrog, a brother, a son, a person. But here, out here, in this mud and ash graveyard of forgotten names, I understood something the war had been whispering for weeks. We weren't fighting for home, or honor, or even survival. We were fighting because we hadn't died yet. There's a difference. The sergeant finally stood. Time's up, move out. The letters were folded, pocketed, hidden away. Sacred, pointless, both. We stood. We loaded weapons, we checked gear. We didn't look at each other, not really, not deeply. We knew what we'd see, faces wearing death before it arrived. We marched, silently, into smoke, into ruin, into the endless dark. And I finally understood the truth we never spoke out loud. We weren't soldiers waiting to die. We were dead men pretending to still be alive. We were already ghosts. The shelling stopped, just like that. No warning, no distant echo, no trailing thunder. One moment, death falling from the sky. The next, silence. Heavy, pressurized, wrong. We were dug into the mud, half buried, half asleep, half dead already. The sudden quiet felt like someone had sucked all the air out of the world. Trooper Selan looked up first. "Is it over?" He said it like a prayer. Nobody answered. Nobody believed him. Not anymore. Silence isn't peace, it's preparation. The sergeant scanned the horizon, smoke columns, burning tanks, shattered walls. Nothing moved, not even the wind. Then we saw him, the commissar, black coat, boots clean, sword at his hip, bolt pistol gleaming like it never missed. He walked through the cratered mud like he didn't feel the weight of the dead beneath his feet. He stopped in front of us and smiled. Not warm, not proud, not inspired. A smile like a guillotine. "Guardsman," he said, voice calm, clear, practiced. "We have been given the honor of making the final push." None of us spoke. The psyker had stopped whispering days ago. Ceylan just stared. The sergeant kept his jaw clenched so tight the veins in his neck bulged. The commissar continued. The enemy has been weakened by bombardment. A lie. We'd seen what artillery did here. It didn't weaken anything. It fed the ground. It woke things that shouldn't wake. He paced slowly, like a sermon in motion. The time has come to break them, to take ground, to show the Emperor our worth. Another lie. We had no worth, not to anyone who mattered. We were already half dead. Most of us had no ammo left. No strength, no faith, just a pulse and a laser gun and a number stamped into our flesh. He stopped pacing, turned to face us fully, and smiled wider. We charge at once. Silence, thick, like blood just before it spills. The sergeant spoke first, voice low, respectful, but edged with something dangerous. Commissar, what support do we have? The commissar blinked. None. What about armor? None. Aerial cover? Denied. Reinforcements? He didn't answer, didn't need to. We already knew. We were the reinforcements, we always were. Ceylan swallowed. We can't cross that field, there's... The commissar didn't raise his voice. He didn't glare. He simply turned his head, and Ceylan stopped talking. A dead man doesn't need a bolt round to fall silent. The commissar raised his voice again. For Cadia, for the Imperium, for the throne. No one repeated it. No one dared refuse it. He drew his power sword. It hissed as it lit, crackling with barely contained energy. He pointed it toward the front line, toward the smoke, toward the burning horizon where men died screaming, "Fix bayonets." We did, not because we believed, not because we agreed, because there was nothing else left to do. The commissar looked at each of us, in turn, judging us, weighing us, not as people, as fuel. He lingered on me a moment longer. I still don't know why. Then he spoke. Form up. We formed up. We were 18 when we left the dropship. We were 9 now. Some missing limbs, some missing hope, all missing something they'd never get back. The commissar took his place at the front. He didn't look back, not once. We heard something in the smoke ahead. Not movement, not voices, breathing, like a wounded predator, waiting, starving. We stood still. Our hearts didn't. They pounded, not with courage, with survival's last instinct. Not like this, not like this, not like this. The commissar lifted his sword. The sergeant whispered without meaning to. Emperor, help us. The commissar heard. He smiled wider. The Emperor helps those who prove themselves. Another lie, but a beautiful one. He inhaled deeply, as if he enjoyed the stink of this world. Then he screamed, no fear, no doubt, no hesitation. Charge, and we ran. We ran into smoke, into fire, into las fire streaking through the air, into autogun rounds snapping past our heads, into madness, into death. We didn't shout, we didn't roar, we didn't chant. We just ran, because stopping meant execution, moving meant dying, and death by bullet was cleaner than death by commissar. The first beam hit Trooper Veln in the neck. He didn't fall, he just stopped, blood spraying in an arc, his body turning to steam before gravity claimed it. The second round hit the psyker. Whatever was left of his mind died before the rest of him did. The third tore through Ilrin's leg. He tried to crawl, didn't get far. We kept running. We didn't decide to. We didn't want to. Momentum was the only god that mattered now. Shells burst in front of us. Fire bathed the ground. Men burned alive. Their screams poisoned the air. Still, we ran. Laspaks overheated. Some guardsmen threw their weapons aside. Others used them like clubs. Bayonet against madness. Steel against chaos. Flesh against fate. I don't remember who we reached first. Cultists, traitors, demons wearing stolen skin. Doesn't matter. They were close. We were closer. I stabbed a man through the stomach. He laughed and pulled himself further onto the blade, whispered, "Thank you." Then he exploded. Blood everywhere. In my eyes, in my mouth, in the wound already forming on my arm. We kept pushing. The commissar's sword was blazing. He cut down 3, 4, 5, laughing the whole time. He loved this. He lived for this. Death wasn't horror to him. It was purpose. He turned back long enough to shout at us, "Die with faith!" Ceylan got shot through the skull. Didn't even drop his rifle before he fell. Boras slipped in the mud. A bayonet found his spine. He didn't scream, just sighed, almost relieved. The sergeant fell next, not from a bullet, from a heart that had been tightening for days and finally snapped. I think he died before he hit the ground. 3 left, me, 2 others, and the commissar, still smiling, still swinging that blade like death was his dance partner, still believing we were doing the Emperor's work. He turned to us and said the last words I ever heard him speak. "Your lives honor the throne." Then he raised his pistol, not at the enemy, at us. "If you flee, I'll shoot you myself." We didn't flee. We were too far gone for that. Too deep, too broken, too finished. We charged because there was nothing left to do but stop moving and die. The commissar raised his sword again and shouted, "Die well!" That was the last thing he ever told us. Not to win, not to hold the line, not to survive, just to feed the war what it wanted. Blood, fear, flesh, faith, broken bodies, shattered minds. He didn't lead a charge, he led a sacrifice. We didn't follow a commander, we followed a butcher. And as I ran, lungs burning, vision blurring, heart cracking under the weight of one final truth, I understood him. He wasn't cruel, he wasn't mad, he was loyal. Loyal to a lie that demanded bodies. We weren't soldiers, we were offerings. Ritual, fodder, fuel. The commissar smiled once more, almost kindly. He told us to die well. There comes a moment in every guardsman's life when the laser gun is no longer enough, when the ammo is gone, when the charge pack is dead, when the rifle is nothing but dead weight in your hands. That moment came in the middle of the charge. Smoke everywhere, blood on everything, screams shredding the sky. Someone shouted, "Fix bayonets," not the commissar, not the sergeant, just someone who still remembered how to be human for one more second. We did, hands shaking, vision blurred, hearts pounding so hard we felt them in our teeth. We locked bayonets into place, steel on steel, something real in a world falling apart, something solid, even if it would soon be wet with blood. We didn't have time to breathe. The air cracked open, not air, reality. It split like rotten cloth. Something came through. Not a man, not a traitor, not something that ever belonged to flesh. It screamed, and the sound was wrong. Not loud, not sharp, just wrong. Like the noise was inside us instead of out. Like it bypassed the ears and went straight for the skull. Trooper Vesk dropped his weapon and clawed at his face. "Get it out! Get it out! Get it out!" He tore out his own eyes and still kept clawing. The thing stepped forward. It didn't walk, it didn't float, it impinged, like it was being projected from a dream that didn't want to wake up. The ground warped under it, grass died, mud boiled, shapes moved in its shadow, shapes that did not exist until they were seen. Someone behind me whispered, "Demons." Someone else laughed, or cried, or both. No difference anymore. The warp bled through the air, colors that shouldn't exist, smells that burned the lungs, sounds that clawed at thoughts, dozens of them now, maybe hundreds, all wrong in different ways. One was made of hands, one was made of mouths, one was made of nothing but teeth. Another still wore the armor of a fallen Astartes, but the flesh inside had liquefied into screaming light. They didn't charge, they didn't need to, we charged them. Not because we were brave, because there was nowhere else to go, and death was simpler than thinking. I swung first. Steel met something that wasn't flesh, but it still bled. Black fluid, thick as tar. It hissed when it touched the ground. The demon shrieked, not from pain, from joy, like it wanted to be wounded, like it feasted on the act itself. Another lunged at Selan. He stabbed it through what should have been a throat. It dissolved into smoke and laughter, then reformed behind him and tore out his spine. He didn't scream, he just collapsed. A marionette with cut strings. A demon rose in front of me, tall, thin, made entirely of stretched faces, all screaming, all begging, all remembering. I stabbed it, right through the center. Steel entered, steel passed through, steel came out the other side, and the demon leaned closer. Voices poured from its many mouths. Voices I knew. Garron. My name. You left me. Ral's voice, broken, empty. You let me die. Then my sister's voice. Why didn't you come home? I screamed and shoved the bayonet deeper. It passed through again, pointless, hollow. The demon simply kept speaking. This is what the Emperor made you for. I ripped the blade free and drove it upward through its skull. The heads burst like rotten fruit. Warp light spilled out. The thing collapsed, then reformed, then leaned closer again. Men were going mad around me. Some tore off their masks. Some stabbed themselves just to drown out the voices. Some knelt and prayed, not to the Emperor, to the things killing us. Because when reality breaks, anything that answers becomes a god. The commissar was gone. Dead or screaming, didn't matter. Bayonets flashed in the smoke. Blood sprayed. Not always ours, not always theirs. The lines blurred, so did we. Trooper Ilrek tackled a demon twice his size, stabbed it in the chest over and over again, screaming a prayer to a saint no one remembered. The demon laughed, then melted him. His armor fell empty into the mud. I spun, stabbed another. This one had too many wings and no face at all. The blade slid in, again and again and again. It didn't matter. They didn't die right. They didn't die fully. They just changed, and the warp spread. Everything was bending now. The air was rippling. The ground was pulsing. Colors were dripping out of the sky. A man next to me started coughing. Blood came out first, then teeth, then words not meant for human mouths. He collapsed. His skin peeled off like paper. The warp taint had taken him. His last breath sounded like a prayer spoken backwards. The Psyker, what was left of him, stood in the center of the chaos, eyes glowing. Blood pouring from his nose. He screamed, "It's breaking through!" He wasn't talking about the demons. He meant the universe. Something bigger, something worse, something we didn't have a name for. Then he exploded. Not from a blast, from pressure. The warp crushed him from the inside out. He burst like a water balloon, and then his blood moved. Like it was alive. It crawled toward the demons. They fed on it. Like dogs, like gods. The battle was no longer a battle. It was a place where logic had died. And we were still standing inside the corpse. I couldn't hear anymore. Not over the shrieks, the roars, the endless laughter. Not over the warp itself tearing a hole inside my thoughts. A demon rushed me, faster than anything that size should move. I didn't dodge, didn't think, didn't hesitate. I thrust the bayonet forward. It sank into the demon's throat. This time, something changed. The warp light flickered, the body stuttered, jerked, cracked, and it screamed, not joy, pain, real pain. Its blood spilled, burning the mud. The corpse fell, dissolving into smoke and static. I stared at the blade in my hands, dripping, warp-stained, still steel, still real, still mine. Another demon charged, and another, and another. We fought like madmen, because we were. Because sanity had no place here. Because the warp eats reason first. We stabbed and stabbed and stabbed until there was nothing left but smoke, and the taste of iron, and the knowledge that nothing we killed ever stayed dead. I stood there, panting, mud sticking to my armor, blood burning my skin, ears ringing, head splitting. We were surrounded by corpses that weren't corpses, blood that wasn't blood, and silence that wanted to speak. I looked at the squad, what was left of it. None of us said a word. None of us needed to. Our faces said everything. This wasn't war. This was a wound, a hole in existence, a place that should not be, and yet was. We weren't supposed to fight things like this. We weren't supposed to see them, but we did, and we lived. Long enough to know the truth. We won nothing. We saved nothing. We survived nothing. We simply existed. Long enough to drag a blade across the boundary between reality and madness. Long enough to hurt something that should never bleed. Long enough to become a part of the horror. The last thing I remember was my bayonet, dripping with impossible blood, catching the warp light and bending it. And one thought formed in my mind. Sharp, clear, undeniable. We stabbed the impossible. We didn't win the battle. We survived it. That's all the Guard ever does. Survival is our only victory. And even that is temporary. The demons finally faded, drifting back into the warp like smoke sucked into a vent. Reality sealed itself, like a torn wound trying to close before infection spread any further. The traitors fell back too, not routed, not defeated, just withdrawing, like they'd had their fun, like they'd taken what they wanted. and now they were leaving us to bleed out in peace. The battlefield went quiet. No screams, no shells, no charging bodies, no warp shrieks eating sanity. Just silence, a dangerous silence. The kind that waits. We stood in the open, panting, soaked in blood. Ours, theirs, no way to tell which anymore. 3 of us left. Me, Boras, Selen. No sergeant, no psyker, no commissar, no squad. No hope. The trench was only 20 meters behind us. We limped back toward it, not because it was safe. Nothing was safe, but it was familiar. A hole in the ground, a grave we knew. We dropped into the trench and stopped. Something was wrong. Terribly wrong. We hadn't been gone long, minutes at most. But the trench, it wasn't the same place. The angles were wrong. The walls were too high, the shadows too deep, the smell too thick, and the bodies, Emperor, the bodies. There were more of them, dozens, then hundreds, stacked, layered, packed into the walls like bricks, some fresh, some rotting, some missing half their faces, but all watching. We froze. Seelan whispered, This wasn't here before. He was right. When we'd left, it was just dirt, mud, and a few fallen guardsmen. Now it was a crypt, a mass grave built in the dark. Boras stepped closer to one wall, reached out, touched it, regretted it instantly. Flesh moved, not with life dash, with memory. The body shifted under his hand and whispered. We heard it, all 3 of us, a breath, barely air, barely words. Stay! We stumbled back. I raised my laser gun. Empty, dead cell, useless. Boras aimed his too pointlessly. Selen didn't even try. He knew, whatever this was, dash. You couldn't shoot it, you could only fear it. And we were already doing that. The trench felt tighter now, like it was closing, like it was breathing. The ground beneath us was soft, too soft, like it had been dug up and filled again with meat. A corpse near my feet twitched, just slightly, but enough. Its mouth was open, jaw broken, eyes staring. Its lips barely moved, but I heard it clearly. You never left. I stepped back. I shouldn't have. There was a body behind me. It shifted too, and spoke. Same voice, same tone, same message. Still here, Boras snapped. He pointed his gun at the corpses and pulled the trigger. Nothing. Click, click, click. He kept clicking, kept pulling, kept screaming. And still, none of the dead reacted. Not to the screaming, not to the weapon, not to the madness. They didn't need to. We were already where they wanted us. The trench was wrong now. Not a line of defense. Not a mark on a map, and not even a place. It was a mouth, and we were in it. Selen backed against the wall. A face stared at him from inches away, eyes clouded, skin peeling. It whispered, rest. He screamed and shoved the body. It didn't fall. It was part of the wall, part of the trench, part of the earth. He turned to me, shaking. Hale! We need to get out. We need to climb. We looked up. There was no way out. No ladder, no slope. The trench walls had grown taller, twice as tall, 5 times as tall. They were closing in, not collapsing, just tightening, like ribs around a lung. Boras tried to climb. He made it 1 step. The dirt shifted, not dirt, flesh, hands, hundreds of them, rotting fingers pushing him back down. He fell, hard. His helmet rolled away. He scrambled to grab it, but a corpse grabbed it first, pulled it into the wall, pulled it inside, swallowed it. Boras started crying. Not loud, not desperate, just quietly, because he understood. We all did. This wasn't a trench anymore. It was a tomb, built from us, waiting for the rest. Seelan whispered, We're dead, aren't we? I didn't answer. There was nothing left to say. The air grew hotter, heavier, breathing hurt. The walls pulsed, just slightly, like a heartbeat. We heard more whispers, hundreds, layered, soft, wet, voices of the dead speaking in unison. Stay, sleep. Don't leave. Join us. Boras stood, shaking, broken. He pressed his hand against the trench wall. His face softened, like he was finally tired, finally done. He whispered, I just want it to stop. The wall opened, just slightly, wide enough. He stepped forward. The bodies inside opened their arms, and he went in. They closed around him. He didn't scream. Not once. He chose it, or it chose for him. Selen fell to his knees. He covered his head, rocking, muttering, "This isn't real. This isn't real. This isn't real." The dead answered him. "It is. It always was. Nothing leaves here, not really." I didn't run, didn't speak, didn't pray, just listened. The trench was alive, not a ditch, not cover, not even soil. It remembered every step, every corpse, every drop of blood, and now it wanted more. A whisper came from beneath my boots, from the mud, from the dead inside it, from the earth itself, hungry. Selen started screaming, tearing at his mask, tearing at his armor, trying to claw his way out. The wall opened behind him, arms reached, dragged him in. The mud rose, covered him, silenced him. I stood alone now, every corpse watching, every wall breathing, every inch of earth speaking without needing a voice. I understood now. We never left. Not the battlefield. Not the nightmare. Not the war. Not the trench. We lived here. We died here. We stayed here. I took one breath. Just one. It tasted like rot, like memory, like endings. And the trench whispered one final truth. Not to frighten me, to welcome me. The trench was hungry. There's a lie they tell new recruits. A simple one, a comforting one. The strong survive. But out here, where the sky bleeds, where the earth eats the dead, where screams become part of the air we breathe, the truth is different. No one stays strong. Everyone breaks. It doesn't happen all at once, not in some dramatic moment. It happens in pieces. A little fear here, a forgotten prayer there, a friend who doesn't get back up, a night too long to sleep, a sound too quiet to ignore, until suddenly something snaps. That day, it was Trooper Helrin. He didn't shout, didn't cry, didn't announce he'd had enough. He just stood up in the middle of trench chow and started walking, not away from battle, not towards safety, just away, through smoke, through mud, through corpses, through everything holding us here. The sergeant called after him. "Helran, get back here." Helran didn't answer, didn't even turn. He just kept walking. We all watched, silent, because part of us wanted to go with him, part of us already had. That's when the commissar appeared. Boots polished, coat immaculate, face carved from stone and faith. He watched Helran walk a little longer, then said, "Stop, or die." Helran didn't stop, didn't slow, didn't care, and that made him dangerous, not to the enemy, to command. The commissar raised his bolt pistol, executed him from behind. Helran fell forward, face first, didn't twitch, didn't stir, just stopped being alive. We stared, we didn't dare move. The commissar turned to us and said, "Desertion spreads like plague. We burn it out early. We thought that was the end of it." It wasn't. He pointed at 10 men. No pattern, no logic, just 10 names spoken like a reading of the dead. Step forward, they did, slow. Number, one whispered, "Commissar, please." He answered with a nod, a kind one, the worst kind. "Your sacrifice will strengthen morale." He shot them, all 10, one by one. Not rushed, not angry, calm, efficient, righteous. The bodies dropped into the mud. We didn't look away, we didn't breathe, we didn't blink. Because if we did, we'd scream, and if we screamed, we'd be next. The commissar holstered his pistol and said, "The Emperor rewards loyalty," then left, as if he'd just corrected a bookkeeping error. We didn't move for a long time. The trench felt smaller again, tighter, like the bodies were watching, like the walls remembered. Salen whispered, "That wasn't discipline. That was fear." Boras whispered back, "Same thing out here." We stayed in silence after that. Silence was safer. Silence didn't get executed. Then the psyche began to shake, not from cold, not from pain, from pressure, from something inside him growing too large to fit inside his skull. His eyes rolled back. His breathing stopped. He stared upward, into a sky that offered nothing back. He whispered, "It's coming." We didn't ask what. We already knew better. Then he screamed, not in fear, in knowledge. He started reciting words, not imperial, not human, warp tongue, raw, and burning. The wind turned inside out. The trench shook. The air thickened. We backed away. All of us, even the brave ones, even the fools. He clutched his head, blood pouring from his eyes, his ears, his nose, his voice layered, warped, dash, no longer his. The veil is thin. Selen tried to steady him, put a hand on his shoulder. The psyker turned, his mouth opened, and a voice like a choir of dying stars poured out. He is watching. Then he exploded. Not like a grenade, not like a shell, like a burst of warp pressure, turning flesh to mist. What was left of him rained down on us, hot, burning, wrong. Boris wiped blood from his visor. It's inside us now, he whispered, and none of us disagreed. We thought that was the end of the horrors. But the warp doesn't end. It escalates. The sky flickered. Not lightning, not artillery, something worse. Colors that shouldn't exist, shapes without edges, a pulse we could feel in our teeth. The air crackled. Fear got loud, the wind began to scream, and the trench, our grave, our home, our cage, began to shake. Selen looked up, and his voice was barely breath. Hale, look. I didn't want to, but I did. You always do, even when you know you shouldn't. Even when your mind begs you not to. The sky was tearing, not cloud, not smoke, not weather, tearing like fabric, splitting apart, revealing something beneath it, something huge, something waiting, something hungry. I dropped my laser gun, didn't mean to, didn't care, because weapons meant nothing now, orders meant nothing, faith meant nothing. The Commissar had no words for this, the Emperor had no mercy for this. There were things older than war, older than mankind, older than gods, and they had seen us. The air grew hot, the ground grew cold. Something whispered in a voice deeper than planets. At last. Selen grabbed my arm. What do we do? I didn't answer. Couldn't, because I finally understood the truth. We weren't meant to survive this. We were meant to witness it. Every guardsman breaks. Some from fear, some from despair, some from madness, some from truth. This time, it was all of them, all at once. The wind screamed louder. The trench vibrated. Men dropped to their knees. Some prayed. Some laughed. Some tore their helmets off and begged for it to hurry. Boris just stared upward. Empty. Number. Done. And me? I watched, with no hope left, no strength, no lies. Just eyes open to the horror no one else would ever live long enough to describe. The warp roared. Reality trembled. And the sky, finally, truly, terrifyingly, split open. The sky was still split. Warp light still bled through the tear. But something else came with it. Not demons, not echoes, not the whispering horror of the warp. Engines, real engines, human engines, steel-shaking, earth-crushing engines. We heard the rumble before we saw them. At first it sounded like thunder, then like drums, then like salvation. Trooper Selen, bruised, bleeding, barely upright, whispered, "Emperor, please, please let that be real." It was. A shape emerged from the haze. Not a monster, not a nightmare. A tank, a Lehman Russ. Its treads chewed through the corpse-soaked mud. Its armor was scorched but intact. Its main cannon turned slowly toward the burning horizon. A second tank followed, then a third, then more, dozens. A steel wall of Imperial wrath. For a moment, just one moment, my heart moved again in my chest. Hope, the kind I'd forgotten the taste of. The Vox crackled, loud, strong, clear. 8th Armored, 117th Vostroyan, 411th Cadian. We are here. Hold your lines. Stormtroopers followed, Tempestus Scions dropping from Valkyries in controlled descent, landing like angels of war with hellguns hot and ready. Helmets polished, visors clear, uniforms unstained. They hadn't bled yet. They didn't know how bad it was. One of them, fresh-faced, confident, glanced at us. "We'll take it from here, Guardsman." None of us answered. We didn't salute. We didn't smile. We just stared. He didn't understand what he was looking at. We weren't soldiers anymore. We were survivors, and there's a difference. The tanks opened fire. Boom, boom, boom. Earth shook. Demon ichor boiled. Corrupted trenches collapsed in flame and shockwaves. Infantry moved past us, disciplined, organized, fearless. Lasfire cut clean lines through the smoke. Hellguns spat precise bursts. Orders barked. Positions secured. Tactical formations held tight. The Imperium had arrived. The real Imperium. Not the broken remnants, not the doomed front line, not the corpses that kept walking until they fell, but fresh troops, reinforced, armored, confident, alive. And Emperor help me. Some part of me began to believe. Selen whispered, we might actually get off this rock. For the first time in days, I didn't argue. For the first time in days, I allowed a thought that didn't taste like death. Maybe we could survive this. Maybe the nightmare was ending. Maybe dash. Then the tanks stopped firing. Not because they were out of ammo. Not because the enemy was gone. Because something stepped onto the battlefield. Something too large to ignore. Something the guns weren't aimed at. Something the tanks backed away from. I heard the tank commander shouting inside the hull. Back up! Now! The stormtroopers turned. Their sergeant's visor flickered. He raised his weapon and froze. What is that? We saw it then, through smoke, through fire, through the hanging pieces of reality still collapsing from the warp breach. At first, all I saw was shape, too big, too wrong, too alive. Then details emerged, armor plates, not metal, bone, like a cathedral built from the skeletons of titans. A symbol burned into its chest, not chaos, not imperial, something older, something forbidden. Selen's voice broke. No, that can't exist. It moved, not fast, not slow, just certain. Every step shook the ground. The tanks fired. Direct hit. Impact like a thunder god striking a war drum. Smoke billowed, then cleared. The thing was still standing, untouched, unimpressed. It lifted its head and spoke, not in words, in pressure, in sound that vibrated inside skulls. Trooper Selan screamed and dropped his weapon, clutching his head. Stormtroopers staggered. Some dropped to their knees. One fired wildly, not at the enemy, at the sky, at nothing, at madness. The Lehman Russes reversed, not strategically, not tactically, in fear. Something I had never seen in an armored regiment. The Vox burst alive again. All units, fall back, unknown threat, unclassified, unknown. Still it came. Crushing corpses, silencing trenches, warp light flickering off its impossible shape. Not a demon, not a chaos spawn, not a god, not a weapon. Something worse, something that didn't belong in this galaxy, or any other. Stormtroopers opened fire again. Targeted, precise, trained, but nothing hit mattered, nothing slowed it, nothing registered. It kept coming, past the tanks, past the trenches, past the dying, straight toward the living. Straight toward us. Boris whispered, Hale, what do we do? There was no answer. There was no tactic, no doctrine, no protocol. This was not a threat the Guard was meant to face. This was not something mortal minds were meant to comprehend. A tank shell struck it again, point blank. The explosion lit the battlefield like a second sun, and when the smoke cleared, it kept walking, slow, quiet, inevitable. Selen began to cry, not loudly, just enough to know the last piece of hope was gone. I raised my laser gun, dead power pack, didn't matter. Pointing it was instinct, something native to being human. You fight, even when it's useless, especially then. The stormtrooper beside me looked at me. No arrogance now, just the truth of war on his face. What is it? I didn't know the name. Didn't have to. Some horrors don't need introduction. I answered him anyway. Something worse. He swallowed. We thought chaos was the enemy. I stared at the impossible thing moving through fire without slowing, and I whispered the last truth the battlefield had left to give. We thought chaos was the worst. We were wrong. We thought we had seen the worst. We thought the warp was the end. We thought the demons were the true horror. But the galaxy is cruel enough to prove us wrong every time. The first warning wasn't sound. It was vibration. A tremor through the ground, subtle at first, then stronger, then relentless. At first, I thought it was the tanks, but the tanks were idle, still, silent. The earth itself was moving. A low rumble rolled across the battlefield, felt more than heard, like the planet was groaning under its own weight. Selen looked at me, eyes hollow, voice cracked. Not again. Then came the second warning. The sky went dark. Not nightfall, not smoke, not weather. A shadow. Massive. advancing, blotting out the light. Clouds twisted into spirals, absorbed, consumed, swallowed whole until only blackness remained. A storm without lightning, a sky without mercy. And then, the sound. Not a roar, not a scream, not artillery. A hive breath, like a million lungs inhaling at once. The wind smelled wrong. Rot, meat, acid, life being unwoven to feed something else. The first spore impact struck 50 meters away. A green comet, trailing smoke and disease, tearing open the ground like a meteor. Inside it, something moved, something alive, something hungry. It unfolded itself, not like flesh, more like a weapon remembering it had shape. Chitin, claws, teeth where teeth should not exist. A gaunt, tall, skeletal, wrong. It didn't screech. It hissed, like it was annoyed the meal wasn't already dead. The second spore landed behind it, then a third, then dozens. Then the sky rained monsters. Trooper Vaughn was the first to fire. A reflex. A lie he still believed. Laser guns can kill anything if you shoot fast enough. He fired full auto into the thing's chest. The shots burned holes, tiny glowing wounds. The gaunt didn't flinch. It just watched him with alien eyes. Then it moved, faster than a charging orc, faster than a lunging demon, faster than panic. It was on him before he could breathe again. One claw, one strike. His torso split open, clean. No scream, just red steam rising. The rest of us staggered backward. No formation, no discipline, just survival. Spore pods kept falling, each one birthing something worse than the last. Hormagaunts, termagants, warriors, beasts with biocannons built into their own living tissue. They moved like a tide. No words, no fear, no hesitation, just hunger, perfect, weaponized hunger. Stormtroopers opened fire, disciplined, accurate, fearless. Their hell guns burned through one gaunt, then another. But for everyone that fell, 5 took its place. A Valkyrie tried to lift off, too slow. A Tyrannid leapt, one claw through the cockpit. The aircraft dropped, exploded. We ran, not because of orders, not because of morale, because instinct screamed loud enough to drown out every other thought. Move or die. Selan and I reached the burning hull of a chimera, half melted, but tall enough to climb. We scaled it. Weapons raised, breaths burning. But the view from the top was worse, far worse. The battlefield was moving, not metaphorically, literally moving, like the ground had become a sea, rippling with alien flesh, clawed limbs, bone blades, and carapace armor. Thousands, tens of thousands, a hive swarm, not a battle, a consumption event. The Lehman Russ tanks fired again, this time with full payload. Shells tore through the swarm, bodies burst, limbs flew, acid sprayed, but nothing stopped. The Tyrannids didn't break formation. They didn't scream. They didn't care. The dead were already being eaten by the living, repurposed, reshaped, regrown. The hive mind wasted nothing. We were watching an ecosystem of war devour itself upward. Selan pointed, voice shaking. "Hale, look!" I did, and wished I hadn't. Beyond the main swarm, towering above them, something huge was moving. Not fast, not slow, just certain. A Tyrannid Carnifex, bone plates thicker than tank armor, more dripping acid, muscles like coiled iron. It slammed into a Lehman Russ, not with claws, with its skull. The tank flipped, like a toy. The crew tried to escape, clawed apart in seconds. No resistance, no chance, just biomass. Reclaimed. A stormtrooper squad held position near the trench line. Perfect spacing, elite discipline, hell guns blazing. The swarm reached them. They lasted 8 seconds, not because they fought poorly, because 8 seconds was the most any living thing could survive in that feeding zone. Selan spoke again, not a whisper, not a prayer, a fact. We can't kill that. I didn't argue, because it was true. The Imperium can kill anything, but not everything. Not a hive, not a swarm, not a living tendril of a creature the size of continents. We were watching evolution fight with purpose. We were watching instinct become a war machine. We were looking at the truth. Mankind wasn't the apex of anything. We were prey wearing uniforms. A group of Cadian survivors ran past us, screaming, firing backwards, covered in blood that might not have been theirs. One slipped. The swarm overtook him, He didn't even have time to scream. Just one bite and he was gone, not torn apart, swallowed. Selen asked the real question, what do we do? And I answered honestly, we die. Not noble, not brave, just fact. The swarm closed in, the world shook, the sky pulsed, the hive breathed, and we, the proud, the broken, the forgotten sons of the Astra Militarum, stood on top of a dying machine, watching the future devour us in real time. I raised my rifle, dead power pack, didn't matter. Selen drew his knife, didn't matter. We weren't warriors anymore. We were calories, fuel for something bigger, older, hungrier. The swarm surged. The Carnifex roared. The sky darkened even further, not by ash now, but by wings. Gargoyles descended like a living plague. The Tyranids had arrived, not to conquer, not to torture, not to corrupt, but to feed. Everything became noise, everything became claws, everything became terror, and in the last moment I had to think at all. I understood something the Imperium never teaches. Chaos corrupts minds, Necrons erase history, Orcs overwhelm armies. But Tyranids, they rewrite the definition of life itself. The galaxy doesn't fear them because they are evil. The galaxy fears them because they are inevitable. Bodies were torn apart, armor was shredded, flesh was devoured, bone was ground under chitinous hooves. My last thought was not of hope, or home, or the Emperor, just the final truth. We were ants before a god. There comes a point in every guardsman's life where the orders stop sounding like tactics and start sounding like funerals. This was that point. The Tyranid swarm was everywhere, in front of us, behind us, above us. The air was thick with spores and corpse smoke. The ground was hot from blood and bioacid sizzling through it. We were surrounded. There was no retreat, no fallback point, no safe route. Just the order burning in our ears. Hold the line. It came through the Vox before the operator was torn apart. His last transmission was half static, half prayer. After that, silence. No more commands, no more updates, no more hope. Just the memory of an order already doomed. We were down to 9 men. 9 terrified, exhausted, half-broken guardsmen. The trench wasn't a trench anymore. It was a shallow grave we kept refusing to lie down in. We took positions anyway. Because that's what the Guard does. Even when there's no point, even when we've already lost, we fight, because dying is part of the job. Trooper Selen checked his laser gun, battery blinking red, dangerously low. He tried to laugh, but the sound came out cracked, shredded. I think I've got 3 shots left. Boris checked his own. 1 if I'm lucky, maybe 2. I looked down at mine. It wasn't a laser gun anymore. It was hot. The barrel glowed faintly. The charge pack was blistering against my palm, overheated. 1 more burst, and it would melt. We all knew it. But we didn't drop our weapons. A guardsman never drops his gun, even when it's dead, even when it's useless, even when the next pull of the trigger kills you instead of the enemy. The Tyranids were closing in again. We could hear them breathing, a hive lung exhaling hunger, clicking claws on stone, chitin scraping armor, bioweapons pulsing, wet and alive. Selen pulled the Vox unit from the ruined operator's corpse. He tried the dial. Static. He tried again. Static. He slammed it against the trench wall. Static. Then, a voice. Broken. Weak. Crackling with static and distance. No reinforcements. Hold. Die hard. Then silence. Selen stared at the speaker. Like maybe it would say something else. Something better. It didn't. It never would. He set it down gently, like it was a friend, like it had done its best. Guess that's that, Boris said. No one argued. No one cursed command. No one panicked. We were too far past those kinds of emotions. We just readied our weapons, because that's what you do. Even at the end, the swarm came into view, silent at first, then screeching, a tidal wave of living blades and teeth. Gaunts, warriors. Carnifex pushing bodies aside like broken statues. A living wall of hunger, the kind of thing that should break the mind. But ours were already broken, so we fired. Last rounds burned through the first wave. Heads burst, chitin cracked, limbs fell, but it wasn't enough. We knew it wouldn't be. We fired anyway. Selen's rifle died first. A sputter, a flicker, Then a soft pop as the charge pack cooked itself and fused into slag. He kept pulling the trigger anyway, hands shaking, brain refusing to accept the end. Boras got one more shot out, took a gaunt through the eye socket, then his weapon overheated, the barrel glowing bright, then warping, then collapsing in on itself like molten bone. He dropped it, not in fear, just disappointment. "I liked that one," he whispered, then drew his bayonet. I fired last, because I had to watch, because someone always does, because someone has to say, "We held." 1 shot, 2, 3 dash. My pack blew. The weapon kicked back, metal searing my hands, cracking open along the housing, spilling dead circuitry. I dropped it, teeth clenched, palms blistered. No more las fire, no more distance between us and death. Only steel now, real steel, the kind that rusts, the kind that breaks, the kind that matters. We drew bayonets and combat blades. It felt right, ending where we began. Hand to hand, face to nightmare. They hit the trench again, gaunts first, leaping, screeching, starved. Boras stabbed one through the mouth. It kept pulling itself down the blade until its teeth were almost at his throat. Seylan tackled another. Both fell into the mud, rolling, screaming, cutting, bleeding. A warrior leapt into the trench, towering over us, talons wide. I ducked its first swipe, felt the second slice through air where my throat had been. I drove my blade up, into the soft hinge at its neck. It shrieked, not in pain, just surprise, then collapsed on top of me. 30 kilos of armored alien crushing my chest. I shoved it off, gasping, covered in acidic blood. My coat was smoking, my skin was burning. Didn't matter, nothing mattered now, but seconds. If we could hold seconds, if we could deny the swarm just a moment longer, that was enough. That was everything. That was victory. Seylan was still alive, bleeding out, laughing. He held a broken knife in one hand and a severed gaunt limb in the other, stabbing with both. Boras was gone. I didn't see him fall. No one ever really sees it. It just happens. And then you're alone. The trench was filling with tyrannids, clawing over bodies, tearing through flesh, screeching the scream of a species that doesn't understand mercy or surrender or fear. Men were dying all around me, fast, brutal, final, and yet we held, not perfectly, not gloriously, not as heroes, but as guardsmen, because that's all we ever were, all we ever needed to be. We bled, we screamed, we fought until our arms stopped working. We stabbed until our hands were no longer our own, and the swarm slowed. Just a little, just enough, just long enough for someone, somewhere, on some distant ridge to say, "They're still holding." I don't remember falling, but I did, face first into mud and bone fragments and blood. Not mine, not all of it anyway. Above me, I heard the hive roar. I heard the psychic pulse of 1,000 alien minds. One hunger, one will, one truth. We were meat, we were brief, we were powerless. But we took time from them. We made them earn the grave. We made them bleed, even if bleeding meant nothing to them. We held, for a breath, for a heartbeat, for a moment that no one would remember. Except me, except us, except the dead who never ran. I felt Seylan's hand on my shoulder, weak, trembling. He whispered, "Hale!" I turned my head. His eyes were gone, his face half-eaten, but he was still here, still fighting the only fight that mattered and not giving up. "Did we," he asked, not finish the question, didn't have to. I answered, "Yeah, we did. We held, not forever, not long, but long enough to matter to someone who would never know our names. Long enough to mean something in a universe that meant nothing. Long enough to die like guardsmen, not with victory, with defiance, with teeth clenched, with weapons broken, with hearts still burning. Long enough for this truth. We held for 5 more minutes. I woke up in the dirt, not from sleep, from unconsciousness. There's a difference. Sleep is rest. Unconsciousness is surrender. The ground beneath me was wet, not from rain, from blood. Mine, theirs, everyone's. I tried to move. Pain answered first. A sharp spike through my ribs. Something inside me was broken, maybe several somethings. Didn't matter. Pain meant I was alive. For a moment I wasn't sure if that was good news. I rolled onto my back. The sky was black. Not night, not smoke. Something else. A wound that hadn't healed. Warp scars still pulsed in the air, glowing faintly like dying stars. The battlefield was silent, not quiet, silent. The kind of silence that follows endings. Every sound had already been made, every scream already screamed, every order already given, every death already claimed. I tried to speak, nothing came out, just breath, just dust, just pain. I looked around, bodies everywhere, Tyranids, Guardsmen, stormtroopers, people I knew, people I didn't, no movement, no survivors, just me, Garron Hale, 98th levied, 8th line company, serial number 9497-3H, a number stamped into flesh. Now the last number left. I dragged myself up, inch by inch, until I was sitting in the crater. It wasn't a crater from artillery. It was where something enormous had crushed the ground. Carnifex, spore impact. Didn't matter. It was a grave now. My grave. I looked at my laser gun. Broken, melted, dead, just like the rest. I tried to stand. My leg gave out. I crashed back into the mud, coughing dust and blood. Still alive, still stuck, still breathing air that tasted like iron and rot and things not meant to live. The kind of air that doesn't forgive survival. Maybe I should have died back there, with Seelan, with Boras, with Ral, with them. With everyone, but fate, the warp, or the Emperor had left me behind. For what? To suffer longer, to witness the quiet, to realize what I never wanted to know, that sometimes the last survivor is just the final witness, not the lucky one. I tried to pray, not loud, just in my head, silent, desperate, bitter. Emperor, if you can hear me, if you care, if you ever cared, show me something. Show me anything. A sign, a light, a voice, a whisper, a reason. I waited, nothing, not a feeling, not a warmth, not a vision, just silence. I tried again. Please, I followed orders, I fought, I didn't run, I held the line, I did everything you asked. I waited, still nothing, just the wind, moving the dust of the dead, just the distant rumble of a sky still bleeding warp light, just the sound of my breath growing weaker. I lowered my head. The helmet felt too heavy. I let it fall off. It hit the dirt with a dull thud, just metal now. Not protection, not identity, not anything. I stared at my hands, shaking, bloody, burned, still mine, still human, for now. The sky pulsed again, warp light flickering, not speaking, not reaching, just watching me die. I whispered, why? Maybe at the Emperor, maybe at fate, maybe at the galaxy. Maybe at myself, but there was no answer. There never was. Not for soldiers like me, not for the ones who never mattered, not for the ones left behind after the story is already over. My vision began to blur, edges softened, colors faded. The pain in my ribs felt distant now, like it belonged to someone else. The dirt beneath me was cold, or I was, didn't matter anymore. I leaned my head back against the crater wall, breathing slow, shallow, final. I thought of home. Not the truth of it, the memory of it, my sister, my bunk, the smell of bread rations, the sound of rain on metal roofs, the way the stars used to look before I knew what they really were. I thought of the day I was conscripted, the brand on my arm, the first order, the first death, the first lie, the first time someone said, the Emperor protects. Now I knew better. We protect him, we die for him, we bleed for him. We are the shield that keeps him safe behind a wall of corpses, and still dash, still dash, we pray, because that's all we have left. I tried one last time, words barely a breath. Emperor, please. My voice cracked, broke, died. I waited, for salvation, for meaning, for anything, but all I heard was the wind. All I felt was the dirt claiming me. All I saw dash was the sky healing itself, slowly closing, without mercy, without regret. My eyes drifted shut, the air grew thin, the world faded into quiet. And I understood the last truth the war had been teaching me all along. There are no miracles here, just death, just silence, just the endless grind of a galaxy that demands everything and gives nothing back. I took one last breath, believing nothing, expecting nothing, and knowing the Emperor was silent. I didn't die with a scream. I didn't die on my feet, blade in hand, staring the enemy down. I didn't buy anyone time. I didn't save the day. I didn't save anything. I just stopped. One breath, then none. One heartbeat, then silence. A life measured in orders followed, battles survived, horrors endured, and in the end, just another corpse in a wasteland of them. They won't write songs about me. They won't carve my name into a stone wall under a golden dome. There will be no roll call of honor, no medal pinned to a chest already gone cold, no candle lit in remembrance, just dirt, mud, dust. The ground will take what's left of me, just as it took everyone else. My bones will rest among last shards, tyrannid claws, rationed tins and shattered helmets. A grave without edges, without markers, without meaning. A grave no one will ever visit. And that's fine. It's what the Guard prepares you for. You don't fight for legacy. You fight because someone pointed you at a battlefield and said, "Go." The truth is simple. We were never meant to survive. We were meant to hold until someone stronger could arrive, until someone braver could take our place, until someone more important could do the real work. We were the meat the war chewed first. We were the numbers in the casualty report. We were the bodies in the trench. We were the sacrifice the Imperium didn't bother to name. And still, we fought. We always fought. Because that's what Guardsmen do, even when the war is already lost. Especially then. In my last moments, I wondered if anyone would remember me at all. Not by rank, not by regiment, but by name. Garron Hale. A man, a brother, a soldier, a body. Just one thread in a tapestry woven from blood and ash. Maybe somewhere, someone might say it once more. Or maybe that name dies here with me. That's fine. Names are fragile things. But the fight goes on. If some future guardsman stumbles through this battlefield, maybe they'll step on my bones and not notice. Maybe they'll find a broken dog tag in the dirt, numbers scratched, name half gone. Maybe they'll feel nothing. Or maybe they'll stop for 1 second, one breath, one thought. Someone died here. And that will be enough. Because that someone could be them. Will be them.
Sooner than they think.
My story ends here. Not with victory. Not with purpose. Just with a final exhale. A final thought. A final truth whispered into soil already drenched with 1,000 others. We were the shield. We were the line. We were the ones who stood where no sane soul would stand. We weren't heroes. We weren't chosen. We weren't blessed. We were conscripted. We were broken. We were spent. And still, we held. The wind moves over the ruins now, carrying the dust of the dead, carrying voices that once asked for help and never received it, carrying memories too broken to mourn properly. No one will bury me. No one will record what happened here. The Imperium doesn't have time for the stories of the lost. It barely has time for the living. So I'll bury myself. Here, under the same dirt I bled into. Here, where every guardsman becomes part of the ground eventually. A name pressed into mud. A number fading from a rusting tag. A life measured in shots fired and screams heard, and minutes bought in a war no one can win. But before the dirt takes me fully, I leave this last thought. I wasn't a hero. I wasn't a legend. I wasn't even especially brave. I was just there. When the shells fell, when the trench filled, when the demons came, when the tyrannids descended, when everyone else died. I was there, and I didn't run. That was enough. That had to be enough. If anyone ever digs through this place, if anyone ever finds my bones, They might wonder who I was. They'll never learn much. Just a serial code, just a regiment number, just another guardsman. But if they look deeper, if they look hard, they might find something else. A message scratched in the dirt, written with a broken knife, written by a dying hand, written so the ground itself would remember, even if no one else did. It says, "We fought, we fell, we were the line, no glory, no victory, no survivors, just truth, just war, just the endless duty of the Imperium's most disposable sons. And this final line, this is the life of an Imperial Guardsman, forgotten but never done fighting."